Welcome to the Pave the Way podcast. It's our show where we speak to experts about urban planning and city sustainability. So today we have Markus Nilsen Rotevatn and Helena Busengdal, who are from Norway, from the EV Association, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Markus. I work in the Norwegian EV Association. It's an association of EV drivers in Norway. I've been working there since 2018. And at the moment I work as a project lead for a project where we are trying to share the experiences of what's happened in the EV scene in Norway in other countries, for example India.
Okay.
Yes, I'm Markus's colleague. I've been working in the association since 2020. A little bit with consumer focus on our surveys. We do some international conferences that I've been working on, and now also this international project with Markus, where we are doing more of sharing best cases, examples, and peer-to-peer learning, mistakes to avoid, and that stuff.
Okay, so why don't we start with Norway? What does the EV scene look like?
First of all, we have to just acknowledge that Norway is so much smaller than India. So I think if you have the whole population of India, Norway, you could probably fit it in one of these small, one of the parts of Delhi, and you probably wouldn't notice us. But when it comes to the share of EVs and the EV uptake in Norway has happened a lot the last 10 years. So at the moment we are seeing that in the new car market, approximately 82% of all new cars sold in Norway are electric vehicles.
82%?
82%.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of the biggest or most accurate measurement on how the things are now. That doesn't mean that almost every car in Norway is electric, because there's a lot of more cars than the new cars. So, but at the moment, in the total fleet in Norway, we are approaching 30% EVs on the roads in Norway now.
And generally, what is the breakup of vehicles within Norway? Like, how many people use personal vehicles like cars, and how many people maybe use like cycling or public transport?
I think in the cities there's a lot of people cycling and walking and using public transportation, and it's increasing, and it's an important part of the city transportation system. But most people living outside cities, and also a lot of people living in the cities and in the outskirts of the cities, are using a personal vehicle within their household, one or two. So Norway is, I would say Norway is a car-based country, but also with a very good equipped public transportation system, and also now moving a bit further ahead also on cycling and walking as a mode of transportation.
Yeah, I think the numbers are something like 5.5 million inhabitants and around 3 million passenger vehicles.
Okay.
So quite high car share, but it's a very long country, and people use their car a lot for commuting, but also going on vacation. It's normal to have cabin up in the mountain, and so cars for a lot of people living in the outskirts of the city is a big part of their everyday life. Okay.
So what are the main challenges faced by EV drivers in Norway? And like, as the association, what do you do to combat some of those?
I think it has varied a bit from the beginning to now. I think when in the beginning and in the start of this transformation, I think a lot of people were worried about range, and the cars who came in the early 2010s and so on, they didn't have that much range, so that was kind of the key challenge in the beginning. But that has changed. I think the average range of a EV sold in Norway now is more than 400 kilometers. So it doesn't need, people don't seem to need more than that to be satisfied, because then we got a pretty nice infrastructure on charging rolled out in Norway as well at the last 5 years, and that has helped a lot with the range anxiety. So in the beginning, I think it was range. Now I would say that we've had an experience of not range anxiety, but charging congestion anxiety, that people are afraid of being of needing to wait for many hours before they can charge when they come to a charge station. That is also improving now because the charge infrastructure is really taken up. So now I think the biggest challenge we have seen the last couple of years is how consumer friendly is the charging. How can we pay for this? The thing in Norway is that if you want to be able to drive your EV all around the country, you have to have around 18 or 19 apps to make sure that you have the connection with the different operators that have different charges. And that's not consumer friendly at all. And that's kind of how we, as an association for the EV drivers, work. We see what are the grievances and what are the challenges for the EV drivers. We're trying to aggregate all of those information from our members and then try to design some policies to tackle those challenges and then promote those policies to our decision makers.
We also have some membership benefits that we've developed because our members do pay a small amount of money to be a member each year, and that is spent into providing different services that will benefit them as EV drivers. So for example, developing some sort of our own charging solutions that you can use to access different chargers and
I wanted to ask, what is the app situation? I like assume it'd be like a plug and play.
Yeah, I think the rollout of charging infrastructure, and especially when it comes to fast charging in Norway, it happened kind of similar at the same time, parallel to the development of EVs and how many who got EVs. And it was kind of a new area for everybody. It hadn't happened in any other country before. So everything kind of happened as we went, and a lot of the charge operators then wanted to make sure that, or they did at least demand that if you want to charge at their place, you need to be a customer at their company. And then you have to register all your payment information to that charge operator in their app. And a lot of different charge operators emerged at the same time or during this period of development, and then it came kind of like a jungle of different apps and payment solutions, and none of them were accepting, for example, payment by tapping a card or a contactless payment in any way. So you had like, and in Norway it can be quite cold, for example. You can have like minus 20 degrees, and one of the biggest grievances we get from our members is that I was yesterday standing outside trying to get this car to charge. I was freezing, it was 20 minus degrees, and I didn't get the app to work, or I had to register a new app and then you like put in all the card information into that while I was standing there. Why couldn't it just be possible to tap my card like, or my mobile payment solution like I do in everything else in Norway? So that's kind of been, it's been a huge challenge for the EV drivers, and one of the reasons why people are, maybe some people are not that interested in going into this thing, because they hear about it so much hassle in a way. Yeah. And I think what we have done there, we have tried to use all of that information and all of these complaints and worries from the EV drivers to design some solutions, possible solutions to our government and to the charge operators. And the charge operators have been a bit not been that interested in this to try to find a solution, because they want to keep their customers, of course. So, but when we saw that this was such a big challenge and it became a problem that people didn't manage to drive their car from A to B because of this trouble with payment, we started to label charging as critical infrastructure, because if the government wants us to change to EVs, they also need to understand that the energy demand or you need to have the opportunity to charge your batteries on your car, and that's critical. If you're standing in 20 minus degrees and you cannot charge your car and cannot move forward, that's kind of critical for many people. And when we started to label it as that, I think the government and the parliament, a lot of members of parliament saw that this is something that we need to regulate, because until then it was not regulated, so the charge operators could do what they wanted, but now they saw this is something that they're responsible for regulating. So last summer we got a decision in Parliament that regulating all new fast chargers needs to have the opportunity to also pay contactless without establishing a customer relationship to the operator. And then in a couple of years it needs to be retrofitted to all of the old chargers as well. So that was kind of a huge win for us and for the consumers, and it's been seen as kind of one of the examples of how consumer power can be changing the opportunities for the EV adoption in Norway.
And I guess now that you're mentioning that you have to like wait in minus 20 degrees, how long normally does it take to charge an EV? And like what is the, I guess, waiting infrastructure of that? Like while it's, you sit in your car and hope you'll be okay.
No, I think the time varies. How long it takes, of course, it depends on a lot of different factors, on the size of the battery but also on temperature. So during winter it can take a lot of time to charge the car. Most of the charge operators in Norway have been focusing on putting the chargers on locations where you have some services, like a restaurant or a cafe or something, so you can wait while you charge. And for many of them, also you have to pay some more because you're buying a coffee, or so it's a business thing for the charge operators and the owners of the services at the same time.
But there's moving a bit away from the challenges, we always also like to really acknowledge that we, in our surveys, see that 95% of EV drivers are really happy about being EV drivers, and close to 90%, I think it's 89 of them, say that they don't want to go back next time they're purchasing a car. So that's good.
And did you get a sense of why maybe like Norway specifically took up EV so readily? Because you did say that people like doing slightly long distance travel to maybe go to a holiday home or something like that. So you would assume it would not be the most obvious place where we had to take that.
No, we actually tried to have a small EV industry in our country already in the 90s. So to promote that industry, the government put in place a tax exemption for EVs. That industry didn't really work out, a lot of different reasons for that, but when the good EVs started coming to market, the more popular family-friendly EVs started coming to market in Norway around 2013, 2015, these policies were kept in place. So it was a different motivation back then, but groups of people and engaged consumers and the environmental organizations in Norway had managed to sort of keep them in place regardless of the industry. So those policies obviously helped in the uptake of EVs when the good cars started to come, because Norwegians are not more environmentally friendly than other people in the world. We know that the consumers choose what vehicle they want to purchase with their wallet. So when we achieved already back then that cost parity between EVs and similar segment petrol or diesel vehicles, people started to choose EVs.
Okay, and I guess that also leads into the next question of how can we collaborate maybe with the government, with businesses, and with other stakeholders to make EV adoption more possible? Because it's not just something that can happen from one direction.
I think we need like different stakeholders from different parts of the society all moving towards the same goal, but maybe differently. It will be natural that the business sector will have some other ways to approaching this than an NGO, for example, and also the government will have some ways to do it, and also some motivation for doing some things that can be different. What we have learned in Norway is that it's so important to have the people's voice in the whole debate and the whole discussion. Because I think what we are seeing is that it's a transition to a new technology, but it's not necessarily the tech companies, it's not necessarily the OEMs and the car industry that's driving this change. Literally, it's the drivers who are driving this change. So it's basically what we've learned, that the voice of the consumers and the voice of the EV drivers have something that have an element that you don't see in the other stakeholders when having this discussion. So for us, it's been important to, and also very interesting learning to see how important that voice has been in the policy making in Norway. And that's one of the examples, was the example I mentioned about how we have managed to get better consumer-friendly charging. The private sector didn't want that. The decision makers didn't understand that. But this is something that every EV driver realized in their day-to-day life when driving an EV. They found it challenging, and they had a place, a community, an organization where they could share that frustration, and we could use that organization, aggregate all that information, and using it to design some policies. And so I think that voice is very important, and I think that's kind of been one of the keys in Norway, not the only one, of course. It's not just because of the Norwegian EV Association, but I think having such a community of EV drivers, making the voice of the consumers in the policy debate has been crucial.
So actually, why don't we talk about some maybe specific initiatives or campaigns that you've been part of as part of the EV Association?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of different ways and initiatives we've done. I think in general it's been important for us to have a clear and ambitious voice, and kind of focused on the targets that maybe seemed unrealistic, but we thought was realistic, and now seems to be realistic. But at the same time being respectful in the whole debate, trying to be professional, using a fact-based approach all the time. We know that a lot of the opposition towards EVs tend to divert from the facts from time to time, if I'm going to say it in a respectful way. But we have tried to not go onto that same path ourselves, and trying to answer, for example, myths about EVs, answer the myths about EVs being fire bombs on wheels, or not that environmental as new fossil fuel cars. We try to answer that with respect, but also with facts, and trying to go into those myths and debunk them. And for us as an EV association, I think that has been a key task for us, but it's also made an opportunity for us, because it made us known. So every time a journalist, or every time a journalist from one of the news outlets in Norway had the case about EVs being not that good as everybody hoped, they knew that they could ask us for a comment or an interview, and then we could answer, because they also knew that we answered with our facts straight. We never answered just, no, that's just I'm not going to say that word, but we actually did research. We did a lot of research. We gathered research from all over the world, but also from Norway, and figure out what's this all about, and then answered with these facts. So that's kind of the general way we were working, and we have done some campaigns as well. Let me think.
I can jump in. Yeah. We also want to, once again also emphasize that this is a community. So every year we focus a lot on the summer holiday in Norway, because that is a common way of spending your vacation with the family, is going on road trips and camping and doing these things with your vehicle. And then with an EV, it's more environmentally friendly and it's better for everyone. And these are the fun things you can do, and people sending us pictures from their travels, and and trying to create a buzz around that and not making charging seem as a challenge during that time, but emphasizing more what is a good idea to what you should maybe plan if you want it to be as smooth as possible and these things. And we've also did a lot of outreach when it comes to in the bigger cities, especially where people would like to have curbside parking, for example. So you were one of the people working on a campaign called direct translated charge here.
Yeah, we did in the big cities and big cities. I have to say in Norway, we have the same challenge as we also heard here when we've been here in India the last week. That one of the big challenges is charging for people living in high-rise apartments and very dense areas. We have some of them in Norway as well, and we've seen that those are the ones who are struggling most with the transition, or maybe don't want to take part in the transition because they don't get to charge at home, because their home parking is at the streets. Their regular parking place is along curbs. And then we had to look at how can we expand the curbside charging in the cities. In Oslo, the capital, we talked a lot with the local government and city administration. They saw it as their public responsibility to improve the charge capacity for those people, because they want everybody to change to EVs if they're going to have a car. But they didn't exactly know where should we build, how much should we build. They started with building like 100 AC charging, like slow charging points at wrong locations, but because it was easy to build them there, they built them there, but nobody used them because it was not where people were parking their cars. So what we did was creating an interactive map online of Oslo, the Oslo region, and we invited both EV drivers and non-EV drivers all over the city to a map where they could just by one click say, I want to charge here. And then click that, and basically writing just I want to charge here because blah blah blah. And then we got the map with a lot of different locations, and after a while it became so many locations that you could, when you aggregated it and see, so you can see some areas of the city. And the city also did some own analysis of this. Where do we know that there's old apartment buildings without parking spots, etc. And they saw that they were aligned with these areas. So now when they are planning their charge infrastructure rollout for curbside charging, they're using that map and their own analysis together to see where should they focus building those charging points. They're not necessarily putting a charging point everywhere where everybody said, I want charging here. But they can see that these areas are most critical to serve. Yeah, so in this way we're using and cooperating with the EV drivers and even the non-EV drivers to find out how can we make it easier to become an EV driver. Yeah.
And I can't resist, so I'm going to have to ask, is there a myth that EVs are like going to burst into flames at any moment?
We have, there's a myth about that. I'm pretty sure it's also been...
I don't think it is over here.
It's not in India?
I've never heard that.
No, because we at least we've heard that a lot of times, and there's been a lot of speculation in is it safe to charge EVs in basement parking lots, for example. But we have managed to debunk that from time after time, and also the Norwegian government and their official directorate for safety have done research on this, and it seems like by all the research done at the moment that EVs are less a fire hazard than internal combustion engine cars. Yeah. So
but I guess that's the thing with new technology. Like when it's first introduced, everyone's like, is it safe in this way? Like, is it reliable?
Absolutely, and it's very exciting for the journalists to write about, like all the negative stuff about the new technology.
But it's also easy to click on. To
Yeah.
Like, your car will burst into flames.
Absolutely. So in Norway, it usually is like every time there's a car on fire, some people tend to think it's an EV, but it seems to be mostly internal combustion engines. catching fire in Norway.
So obviously India has different challenges from Norway. Like the scale is different. I think just the number of people who have personal vehicles is different, percentage-wise. So what are some lessons that we could take from Norway?
Yeah, we try to be a bit careful in not saying too much about what we think India should do or what it should do, because obviously we are by not even close to understand the whole complexity of the Indian society and policy, but I think still there are some similarities in every country when it comes to this, and I think I mentioned it already, but I think trying to figure out what does the consumer need, what does the people who are going to make this change do, what they need is important. And of course, we've understood the mode of transportation is very different in India than in Norway when it comes to percentage-wise. Like there's more 2 and 3 wheelers there. I think there's a lot of potential also in electrifying 2 and 3 wheelers, absolutely. But then you probably have to work in another way than we have done. We haven't those kind of fleets in Norway, but I would guess that you have to work more on fleet operators and these things. But I think the key is to achieve price parity between an EV and its counterpart, either if it's a 2-wheeler, a 3-wheeler, a truck, or a personal vehicle. Because what we've learned that everybody, even individuals, are thinking with their wallets when they're doing this. They're choosing with their wallets. And I would say that if it's a business responsible to buy in cars for their fleets, they're even more thinking about thinking with their wallets. You know, they have to ensure the bottom line and income. So I think trying to find policies that make sure that EVs in par with their counterparts is very important.
I think also we are not a car producing country. Our impression is that you definitely are one. From working with other organizations around the world who also has that kind of experience in transitioning their mobility, we also have seen that it's been very effective with more supply side policy than what we have in our country. Like for example, fuel efficiency standards, but also very interesting in really big economies maybe, the zero emission vehicle mandates that you see in some parts of the world. Like the UK recently adopted one, and California has had them for a while, where you set as a government a certain percentage target for if you want to sell cars in this country, this and this percentage has to be zero emission. Because then you are forcing more of the producers and industry to kind of take care of that cost parity, because they are expected to sell a certain amount of, or not a certain amount of vehicles, but a certain percentage as zero emission. So there are so many different policies to choose from. To our experience, like Markus said, it has to be consumer friendly and it has to create the cost parity, and that doesn't happen with just one policy or one action item in the country. So finding the policy package or something that is suitable to your context is probably what we would sort of spread as the good message.
So sort of jumping off that, what are some maybe incentives that would like create higher EV adoption? Because one of the things that I was thinking about was in low emission zones, it would be easier to bring your like EV into that because you are exempt from that. And I think you mentioned that in the 90s there was a tax exemption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what would be similar incentives?
So our tax exemption for EVs was in the purchase and registration of new vehicles, but then we've also had a policy package concerning more user incentives after you have purchased the car, incentivizing the using of an EV, which would also then apply to a second-hand bought car. that you wouldn't have the same incentives for a new car. But so we have toll rings surrounding all of the bigger city regions in Norway, and EVs have been exempt from paying the toll fee in those toll rings, which has sort of led to creating the cities as more low emission zones than the surrounding area in Norway, because it's been more expensive to drive your petrol or diesel or hybrid vehicle in the city than it has been to choose your electric vehicle in the city. And that also manages to bring the total cost of ownership down for EVs compared to an ICE vehicle. And most people buy a second-hand car in Norway, so it's also nice to incentivize them choosing EVs and not only petrol and diesel vehicles in the used car market as well. And another benefit of those toll rings in Norway and how that policy has been developed is a lot of the income from the toll rings are used to finance public transportation in the cities, which is also nice. All public transportation in the bigger cities in Norway now are starting to become zero emission, so that's also a good thing. So Oslo now is, we've seen a decrease of 20% in local air pollution. The last, I think it's last 10, 20 years. And mobility is part of that, but we also did a lot of other things. So we're not able to say exactly what has contributed to exact percentages, because we did some regulation on how we are heating our houses and stuff that also contribute to bring down pollution. But we have definitely seen, with the high adoption of EVs and electrification of public transportation in our cities and regulation of transport, that this is...
And you can feel it. Like my oldest daughter is 10 years old, and she started in kindergarten 10 years ago or 9 years ago. They had days during winter time that they were not allowed outside because of the air pollution, and that's not happening anymore. So we have actually managed to turn around that situation, and I think that's very, very important. And I think also that's one of the reasons why the toll fees that's been increased for ICE vehicles from petrol and diesel vehicles, they have been increased, and I don't think in any country that's a popular thing to do. I would guess it's the same here and everywhere else. But since, as Helene says, since they are using those income to fund public transportation, to improve the public transportation system, and also the difference of price for EVs and internal combustion engine cars, it could also be a very unpopular thing, but when you also notice that it's actually improving the air quality, and you get better public transportation, and you can have your kids running around in the kindergarten, I think it hasn't been problem-free when in regards of the opposition of those policies, but it has been enough good results that people have seen that this is actually a good thing for us living in the city. And I think that's one of the really good things about living in one of the cities in Norway now. It's actually improved when it comes to air quality.
And I guess one of the things that I've been now starting to have conversations about is people talking about electrifying freight. So not just personal vehicles, but even like long haul trucks, which cause more emissions, but we don't think about it because normally we don't see them in our cities, or we just don't notice them. So is that something that the association is also working on?
Yeah, we recently, last year, a year ago, we got a new employee that is fully committed to working with heavy-duty transportation and the electrification of that transport segment as well. So that's really, really exciting. And the government has set quite ambitious targets in terms of heavy-duty transportation. So that was a part of our colleagues' work last year, pushing for more ambitious targets and seeing them, following them through. So the technology for heavy-duty vehicles, at first people were talking a lot about hydrogen, but now we are seeing that the battery electric vehicles are really beginning to be produced and introduced into the market in Europe especially, and also again in Norway. So last year we had, I think, of new purchases, 7% was fully battery electric also for heavy duty transportation last year. And that, I think that increased with like 5% from the year before that again. So the curve is really taking off for heavy duty transportation. So that is really, really an exciting trend as well. And I think the government set target now is fully electric right from 2030 in Norway, which is quite exciting.
It's very exciting, and I think also in that segment you also have the buses and also boat traffic. There's a lot of ferries in Norway, and that's also happened a lot there the last couple of years. And it's a combination from like national government policies, companies just realizing total cost of ownership benefits, and also what we see that especially the cities are doing in terms of public procurement. They are putting demand, if there's any services or construction or like public transportation, they're demanding it to be zero emission if you're going to take part in the competition to serve the public transportation system. So in Oslo now we have all buses for this, like the main part of Oslo is battery electric, and also all the ferries that goes where Oslo is in the end of a fjord, so there's a lot of ferry traffic to different spaces, and they're also electric. And all over in the country, I think we're approaching, I don't remember all, but 60–70% of the ferries going the whole coastline, because there's a lot of fjords and there's a lot of the road system is based on ferries over those fjords, and they're also becoming battery electric now. So there's happening like this electric revolution also in terms of public transportation, freight, and for now short haul shipping, like short haul transportation by sea. And the first commercial electric air flight is going to happen somewhere 2028 or something. That's the shortest internally in Norway. They already sold out all the tickets for that drive.
Actually, I didn't conceive that we could do electric planes.
So that, some of us maybe will wait until the second or third flight, but it's so much happening there. And I think this is happening because some parts of society sees other parts becoming electric, and it works. It works very well. Like we prefer the electric buses. I commute every day to work with an electric bus, and before it was a diesel bus, and it's so much better. My commute is so much nicer. It's quiet. It's not like this. You don't. It's perfect. So I can actually relax on my way to work and then come to work fresh and ready. So yeah.
So what are your goals for the future? Like just a few things that you're looking forward to in the next, like let's say decade or less than a decade.
I mean, the government in Norway has set quite a lot of ambitious targets, and for our organization, the kind of main pillar we've been working towards is a fully electric new car market from 2025. So we're starting to count down the days because we're supposed to be there by the end of December this year. So from January next year, there's not going to be any petrol, diesel, hybrid, plug-in hybrid cars sold in Norway. So I mean, if we manage that, it's going to be a big celebration at the office, definitely.
We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, so that's in the short term. We definitely look forward to that. And I think also following, we both live in Oslo, so we're a bit partial to that part of the country, but following, and that's also where we spend our everyday life and commuting to work, and following how our modes of transportation and our whole transportation system has really changed and is continuing to change in the better direction is really exciting. Like after we got e-bikes, people are using them more to commute to work than their cars, for example. Also it's quite hilly, so it's nice with that extra help from the battery. And also, as Markus mentioned, just being in these non-smelly, silent electric buses and the ferries and everything. So I think that is definitely exciting, and we are also hopefully going to be establishing some really interesting battery ventures in Norway, starting to produce our own batteries for different modes of transportation and energy storage. If that is successful, we're going to have a lot of new jobs, a whole new industry in green mobility and our green energy future, so that will be exciting to follow. Yeah.
And I think it's not about reaching the target, but also keeping the target when we've reached it. And we've seen that all of this is extremely fragile. If some incentives are taken away, you can see it right away in the sales that, okay, it's not that competitive for EVs anymore, then people will start, or less people will move on. And we've seen now that we're having around 15 to 20% left of the new car market. And the question we are asking ourselves, this is maybe the most difficult part of that segment to change, because they're the late movers. You know, the early movers, they're crazy, they're doing this without any doubts, and then you have the mass market, which is kind of fragmented and difficult to, and you have to have a lot of different policies and packages to meet all the demands. And then you get to the late movers, and they are the ones who are really like, I'm never going to have an EV. And that's where we are now. So that's kind of the challenge, and also then managing to keeping it, because all of this for now is based on policies that makes price parity. The hope is that because we're creating a market, and hopefully the market will expand also in other countries, so that there will be a big market for producers all over the world to sell EVs. And then it will become a natural price parity because of more production. But we need to make sure that this is not something that's forgotten once we reach those targets, because this is not about having as many EVs as possible in the world. It's about changing transportation from something that pollutes a lot and emits a lot of climate gas emissions to do something that actually is sustainable for the future. And that's also why we've been asked to share the experience of Norway, because even if Norway is a small country with the less people than most other countries, it has become some kind of a laboratory for the electric change, which I think many other countries can look at what happened, why did it happen, and translate it, not necessarily copy it, but translate it into their context and see if there's anything that's possible to do elsewhere as well, because we need this in the whole world, not just in Norway.
Okay, so let's just wrap up with like just the one question of like, you have, I guess, a lab situation where you've seen how it works, and there's certain people who take up to it faster and people who don't. So what would be the one like most pivotal change, or like the most pivotal thing to get people to switch to EV according to your experience?
To make it to make sure that EVs are not more expensive than their internal combustion engine counterparts, I would say.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sad finish for that, because people are it seems like people are selfish, but I think it's important, and I think that's the best way to make this change, is to ensure that people are taking part of that change, even if they don't kind of care about the environment or the results, because the results are the same, and you need to have this change so fast. It needs to happen. We need to accelerate the electrification, and to do that we cannot wait to ensure that all of the people of India chooses, like, I want to choose an EV because it's good for the environment. They're choosing with their wallets, then we need to make policies to ensure that that's the easy choice for them.
Yeah, that's been our experience in Norway.
Okay, I think that's about it. That's all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for coming today. I think
Thank
we
you
learned
for
a lot
having us.
about it. Yeah.
It's really great.